Those that don't learn from the past are destined to repeat it. Now, in the early 90s, we had the first Gulf War, then the war in Iraq, then Afghanistan, and then Libya, and now Iran, dropping bombs from the sky to induce regime change in different countries. Has not worked in the past. Why is this time different? So please keep that in mind for the following discussion. Now, is the US, led by Israel, about to make the same mistakes as they did in Iraq? Now, at least back then, before the invasion of Iraq in 2003, there was some sort of stage dressing, like having legally defined procedures such as UN weapons inspectors. We all remember the debates in the UN, Congress, meeting with different allies. It went on and on and on before the eventuality of bombs dropping from the sky. With the current engagement, it seems the US reacted. It seems like Israel, off the leash, attacked first, and then the US were forced to do a preemptive strike against Iran before Iran then responded and attacked US ships in the region. Not my words, these are the words of Marco Rubio. The stated objective was rapid regime change. It hasn't happened yet. It looks like we're going to be grinding into a long war of attrition. The kinetic reality on the ground contradicts the strategic optimism that is erupting from the Pentagon. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, and more importantly, the infrastructure that over the years has been designed to bypass the strait if it was to close has been neutralized. For a decade, global energy has security in the region, and also the region supplies the world, obviously, with its oil, has rested on the bypass assumption. This assumed that the 4 to 6 billion barrels per day of oil that comes through the Straits of Hormuz could actually instead be transferred or diverted via the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline in the UAE and the East-West petrol line in Saudi Arabia. But that's actually been disrupted also. On the 1st of March, Iranian missiles struck the Ras Tanura terminal, and on Tuesday, Iranian drones hit the Fujairah oil industrial zone. And what's happened now is ship insurers have now withdrawn coverage for those terminals, and $79 per barrel of Brent oil was priced on the belief that these bypasses would function. That no longer is the case. History shows that decapitation strikes rarely trigger regime collapse. But as we saw in 1991, when the US tried to encourage an Iraqi uprising, well, what happened? We were only to watch on the TV screens as the participants in that uprising were executed. Now, air power cannot dictate internal political outcomes. Instead of a new Middle East, we're looking at a prolonged war. Are there going to be boots on the ground? Now, the displacement and the disruption has spread. Let's look at Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. So the economic fallout in the UAE is now critical. The US State Department has issued a level 4 leave immediately advisory for the entire region. Now, Dubai, a primary global hub for air travel, is currently non-operational for civilian travel at this moment in time. And since Saturday, over 11,000 flights have been cancelled, affecting more than 1 million passengers. That's roughly 20,000 travelers that remain stranded within the UAE alone. Now, the UAE government has nationalised the crisis response. A directive from the Department of Culture and Tourism has ordered all hotels to extend guest stays at the state's expense. How long can this last for? While local response is orderly, the Western presence in Dubai that has grown over the years is starting to evaporate. Brits and American nationals are currently driving 10 hours through the desert to Muscat, to Amman or Riyadh in Saudi Arabia in an attempt to secure any available chartered flight out of there. Now look at airline stocks as well. Lufthansa have dropped stock 5% up to 9%. The equity indices as a whole are very volatile at the moment. The UAE operated as that hub and spoke model of Middle Eastern travel, connecting the eastern part of the globe to the western part of the globe. Let's look at the eastern part of the globe. Look at China. What types of triggers could cause China to intervene in this US and Israel versus Iran conflict? Now, there are certain, I suppose, lines in the sand for China. China is currently providing indirect support to Tehran, including anti-stealth radar and satellite guidance. However, let's actually start from 5 to 1 here and look at specific triggers that could force the People's Liberation Army into direct kinetic intervention in this conflict. Number 5, the legal precedent. Beijing views the US-Israel strikes as a violation of the UN Charter. If they allow an unmandated regime change to succeed in Iran, well, that sets a precedent. They believe the same legal logic could then be applied to Taiwan. They may intervene to prevent this precedent from being set, or if this precedent is set, they may act upon it. And then we could see a closure of the Straits of Taiwan also. Number 4, the failure of indirect defense. Now, China is currently using Iran as a lab for its electronic warfare systems. If these systems, specifically their drones and manpads, fail to prevent an Iranian military collapse, Beijing may deploy technical advisors to Iran or electronic warfare units on the ground to ensure that their last major partner in this region remains viable. Now, number 3, what about the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, and those BRI assets within Iran? Now, China made a deal for a $400 billion agreement with Iran. This was part of the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative agreement. That means that China owns significant stakes in Iranian ports and railways. Now, if US strikes hit Chinese-funded hubs and assets within Iran or cause high casualties among the thousands of Chinese nationals that actually live in Iran, well, the Politburo in Beijing and the Global Security Initiative there, the GSI, could be compelled to intervene as a protection deployment for their assets and their nationals within Iran. And number 2, what if there's a permanent, prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz? Now, China imports 50% of its total oil and 30% of its natural gas through the strait. While China has a 90-day strategic reserve, a permanent closure could cause domestic industrial collapse within China, and China are not going to allow that to happen. Now, China could then deploy their navy to create a blue corridor for its tankers to exit and enter the Strait of Hormuz. What happens when the Chinese Navy and the US Navy are in close proximity? Well, another escalation fire point. Now, number 1, this is the total collapse threshold. Now, this could be a primary trigger for Chinese intervention in the region. Now, Iran is China's most vital partner in countering US influence in Asia. China cannot afford to lose the 25-year comprehensive strategic partnership that they have with Iran. Now, if the US moves to install a pro-Western, pro-US government in Tehran, Beijing could intervene to prevent the total encirclement of its interests. Now, if China does intervene, what does that mean for the petrodollar? Could the petrodollar era end? Could we see energy settlements in a digital yuan instead? It's a volatile situation, and there are so many uncertainties. Now, talking about uncertainties, and when markets are uncertain, investors seek safe havens. Now, regarding a safe haven, what is the overall impact on Bitcoin? In the short term, Bitcoin trades as a high beta tech asset. It usually marches in lockstep with the Nasdaq. But let's pull back a little bit. Let's look at the broader perspective. The US-China confrontation was to lead to a structural de-dollarization and overall de-globalization. What would happen to Bitcoin? Well, the macro thesis of Bitcoin actually looks a little bit more positive. The macro thesis for a neutral, non-sovereign asset like Bitcoin becomes the primary global financial narrative. And that's quite bullish in the long term.